This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Before we jump into this video, pause it right now and go subscribe to the Hoosier.com website, now a part of On3 Sports, for exclusive content covering the Indiana Hoosiers, including exclusive interviews, live recruiting updates, and much more. Make sure to join our community. We really appreciate it.
And Hoosier Nation, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here on our YouTube page. We got plenty of more content on here, including more talking about the Hoosiers podcast episodes, recruiting highlights, press conferences, and much, much more. It literally takes 2 seconds. Just do it right now, get it over with, and then go on and let's enjoy this new episode.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode 50 of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by The Hoosier. I'm joined by Kyler Staley and Zach Browning. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Big show today as we're talking all things IU basketball ahead of the team's trip to Puerto Rico. But before we jump in, guys, episode 50, how does that feel?
Feels good. Drew, I know Zach is the new kid on the block with the Talking About the Hoosiers. Under the bus. But Drew, I know you and I, we've been doing this for what? It's been 2 years now.
Yeah, I think somewhere around. Yeah,
maybe we're going on 3. When we started this, obviously our goal was to kind of, pump out as many episodes as possible and stuff. And, we've had breaks here and there and stuff, but here we're at 50. And before you know it, we're going to start getting on a more regular basis and stuff with it. So before you know it, we're going to be at episode 100. And hopefully episode 100, we have something a little bit special for you guys. But for episode 50, we're just going to talk some Indiana basketball.
Yeah, Zach's kind of been our Kevin Durant to the Warriors type edition. Just adding to the All-Star team already.
Yeah, I think this is my 6th or 7th episode, so I have not exactly been here for all 50.
I'm definitely Steph Curry, right, in the scenario, right?
If you're gonna claim to be Steph Curry, sure. I was gonna say Leandro Barbosa, but sure.
Drew, then are you Klay Thompson or Draymond Green?
I'll be Dre. I like Draymond. He gets a lot of hate, but I think he's kind of funny and plays hard, gritty.
And then our guy Alec will be Coach Steve Kerr. How about that?
Yeah.
So Alec used to be. We're going to get Alec back on the podcast. We haven't had him on in quite a long time.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that, but we just let's just jump right in, guys. Indiana going to Puerto Rico this week, end of this week into next week, playing 3 games. I believe playing the Puerto Rico, a kind of an all-star team of Puerto Rico, and then 2 games against. Mega
Superbet.
Yeah, Mega Superbet.
Team in Serbia.
So I guess Kyler, starting 5. It's kind of the biggest question surrounding this team. It seems like you have a couple locks with Tucker DeVries, Lamar Wilkerson, Reed Bailey, but what do you guys kind of expect to who's going to fill out the other 2 spots? Kyler, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so basically probably what we're going to be talking about, we have a written version of all this on thehoosier.com. It's a storylines article, so go check that out as well. And then also Alex also got some 4 players to watch here, but starting 5. I think we can all agree 4 out of the 5 are pretty much set, right? Lamar Wilkerson, Tate Connerway, Tucker DeVries, Reed Bailey. I think those are the guys. Those are kind of your biggest pickups of the offseason in the transfer portal. And then after that, it gets kind of interesting, right? Last week, Zach, you were there for that open practice. It looked like Conor Enright was kind of that 5th guy, possibly. He's a guy that's been with DeVries before. He knows DeVries' system, so that makes sense to a certain extent. I do question, if you've got Conor Enright, that's a lot of ball handling, but that's also a good thing as well. But another option you could see them go a little bit bigger, maybe Sam Alexis paired with Reed Bailey, kind of a more traditional front court type of lineup, and then or maybe you can throw in someone like a Josiah Miles from North Florida, a guy that's really showed a lot of promise, during his college career and over the summer. So I think it gets really, really interesting. I think based off reports and what Zach saw, I think I would probably lean towards Conor Enright to be the starter alongside with those other 4 that we mentioned. But it wouldn't shock me if in Puerto Rico, if you see multiple different starting 5s in the 3 games that they play.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Kyler. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of see an assortment of lineups, not only just different starting lineups, but just different kind of combinations throughout the games as well. And you're right. It was Conor Enright that was kind of wearing the white jersey. He was with that kind of starting group during that open practice. Indiana held for us media members. And I think that's probably the right idea. I think it's probably the best way to go for Indiana because if you think about the starting lineup, you have Tucker DeVries, bucket getter. You have Lamar Wilkerson, can go get you buckets. Hayden Conaway too, Reed Bailey, kind of a playmaker scorer as well with Conaway. If you're looking for that fifth starter and you're Darren DeVries, you don't need a guy that can go get you 15, 20 points a game. You don't need a guy like Josiah Miles or a guy like Nick Doran. Maybe that's a little bit more score first at this point in their collegiate careers. You need a guy like Conor Enright that's going to go out and guard the other team's best player, the best guard, I should say. You needed a guy that's going to be able to space the floor still from three, and Enright does that, and a guy that can kind of be a secondary playmaker kind of alongside Conaway. So I think that Enright does end up being that fifth starter, especially this week in Puerto Rico, but especially when we get to actual play here in a couple months.
Yeah, I think the biggest question, though, with Enright, it's the jump shot. It's, I don't want to call it – it's not consistent. Let's call it how it is. He's shown flashes. He shot 45% his last year with DeVries at Drake. Then last year back down to 32% where he shot his freshman year as well at Drake. So if the jumper, isn't falling, it could, be a space killer alongside Tate Conaway, who also really isn't the best shooter. But if Enright's able to get that jump shot back up to that, maybe not 45% like he did his sophomore year, but high 30s, he's, could be a perfect complement alongside Conaway as the other guard. So it's kind of mixing and matching there. And then when you get into, I know obviously this is the Puerto Rico trip, but deeper into the season, you're playing bigger teams. Indiana could look, for a different, maybe Josiah Miles is like a bigger, maybe he's not a true big, but he's a really good rebounder for his position. So it's trying to find that balance because Indiana's already undersized, and it's how much do you want to let being undersized kind of affect how they play.
I kind of agree with you, Drew. I think the biggest thing, if it is Conor Enright that starts alongside with those four that are pretty much locked in the starting lineup, I do think it's the issue of the jumper, right? And him and Tate Conaway, even though they are capable of being guys that can stretch the floor out, can hit the three ball, but it's not consistent enough, and it's a little bit worrisome, and it's not really their strength as players. The playmaking will be there. The toughness, the defense, with those two in your backcourt will be there for sure. But if you have those guys, you're kind of relying on Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, Reed Bailey as your kind of outside shooters in a certain extent when you're trying to start off the game hot. But, from a toughness standpoint, from a guy that knows the experience, I get it why DeVries would go with Conor Enright there. Me personally, I would prefer to go with the guy like a Josiah Miles, maybe even, Sam Alexis as well, just a more traditional lineup. But the playmaking will be there, the ball handling, the defense, the toughness will be there with that lineup. But it is a little worrisome when you think of just like, shooting the outside ball.
Yeah, if you go Enright, two things kind of stick out to me. It's one, the ball pressure on the defensive side. Tate Conaway and Conor Enright are both really good point of attack defenders. When I think Conaway was asked who the best defender on the team was, he said himself, but then after mentioned Enright. Those are two guys that take pride on that end of the court. And, Darren DeVries has talked about forcing turnovers, playing fast, 12 seconds or less, attacking broken court. And a starting five with Enright is a team that's going to do that. They're going to play fast. They're going to look to push the floor and get the Tucker DeVries and Lamar Wilkerson, some of those transition threes off turnovers. So that could fit his style of play more. But then, we look towards like the Big Ten season, and being that undersized will make it difficult, especially on the glass for Indiana.
And I think another kind of point of emphasis, kind of two things, is first off, just because he starts doesn't necessarily mean that he ends the game. There could be obviously a different lineup that ends the game, whether that's Josiah Miles comes in and actually closes out the game when Enright starts. That's besides the point. I think Enright starting also kind of helps the rim protection in a sense because he helps just eliminate paint touches. Yeah. If you're out there and you're Conor Enright and you're taking Conaway, that's just an elite backcourt defensively. So theoretically, you should limit the paint touches. You should be able to limit the pressure that Reed Bailey, Tucker DeVries, they kind of see at the rim. So if you can kind of limit people from getting into the paint in the first place, then it sort of takes away from all the shortcomings you might have as far as rim protection is concerned with that kind of smaller starting lineup.
You make a really good point. You make a couple of good points there, Zach. One, I do think that people do get caught up on the starting lineup way too much than what they need to. It's not about who starts the game. Obviously, you want to have a hot start, and we've seen that with, Indiana the past few years that they struggle to have a hot start. So you want to find that balance. But at the end of the day, it's all about who closes the game, right? You want your best closing lineup there. And who knows, that could be Conor Enright and Tate Conaway together from a defensive standpoint. It just depends on, game by game basis with that. But also the defensive wise, you make a really good point there. I mean, let's call it how it is. Indiana, their rim protecting this year is probably going to be one of their weaker parts of the team. Just based on paper, that could obviously change. Different things could happen. But if you can eliminate those paint touches from the bigs, if you have guys like Tate Conaway, Conor Enright, those guys that are just up in your face right as soon as you cross half court, it really helps in that area. So defensively, I totally see what DeVries could be doing here, but at the same time, we also don't know who exactly is going to be that starting five. This could change, by game 3 of the Puerto Rico trip, and, it could change throughout the season as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting Dere DeVries to try different things. I feel like I'd be more surprised if we saw the same starting lineup all 3 games than if we didn't. It's one of those things, this is when you take chances, take risks, find out, who your guys are and who are going to be the guys in the season you're going to trust. And, Conor Enright kind of has that built-in trust already playing for Dere DeVries. I think we've said it so many times on this podcast. He's going to be a fan favorite, whether he starts or doesn't. He's going to be a guy who comes in, plays hard-nosed defense, and creates, open looks for other guys on his team. And that's, those are things you want on the court, things Dere DeVries clearly is valued when you look at the roster and the way it's constructed. And, we're getting so harped on, or Zach, you mentioned it, we're getting so obsessed with, starting 5, but it really, again, it's who finishes the game. And I think it could be a game by game type of thing where Josiah Miles might, Nick Dorn, who's probably won't play in Puerto Rico, he could finish some games. Jason Drake, there's a lot of different guys that could come in and finish games, and it could just be based on need for each game.
And I think it's interesting, too, because Enright, even if he does start, I wouldn't expect him to play north of 25, 30 minutes a game. When I talked, as soon as Enright committed to Indiana out of the portal, I wrote a story talking to a DePaul beat writer for the basketball team, and he told me that Enright is best served when he's playing kind of around 20 minutes per game, because that's when he can be at 100% energy for all of those 20 minutes. If you'd rather have Conor Enright play 20 minutes at 100% energy than 30 minutes at 75% energy. So I think that's also important. I think it's also important the kind of matchup combinations, and kind of you need probably one of Enright or Conaway on the floor a majority of the time, just because they're really your only proven playmakers at the college level. Lamar Wilkerson can play make a little bit, Jason Drake too, Reed Bailey from the center spot, I guess, if you want to kind of test the waters there. But I think if you're looking at just the combinations of different players on the floor, not even just the starting lineup, you're probably going to want one of Enright or Conaway on the floor most of the time. So maybe Enright starts, plays until the first media timeout, then comes out, and they kind of stagger from there. But it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Enright kind of being like a TJ McConnell, like his role for the Pacers, where, he's not starting, or maybe he does start, but he's, playing in shorter spurts, so he can go 110% for, a 3-4 minute stretch, then sit a couple of minutes, and then come back in and give you that same energy. So it's going to be really interesting how they manage that. And I guess within the rotations, because you look at across the roster, other than, the freshmen, Alexa Risic and Andre Akumovic, a lot of proven guys on this roster who've played big minutes elsewhere. So how does Indiana manage the rotations? How does Dere DeVries do that? Kyler, I guess kind of what are you watching for or looking for from the rotations in Puerto Rico?
I mean, obviously, I think the first thing is, and this probably could change, depending on how the starting lineups look from all 3 games. If they look different, this will obviously change the way that I view this. But I think the first thing you look at is who's the first guy off the bench, right? Is it going to be another big guy? Is he going to instantly get bigger? Like a Sam Alexis, Josh Harris, are they going to come off the bench early, or is it going to be more of a guy that can, stretch the floor, a guard? Is it going to be Jason Drake, Josiah Miles, and Jason Drake? It's 50-50 right now. We don't know exactly if he's going to play with Puerto Rico. I know he's coming off an injury, but those are just kind of things that I want to see. I do think that he's going to be you have to in this type of environment. You have 3 exhibition games that don't really mean anything. He's going to have a lot of different lineups out there. He's going to see what works and what doesn't work. Obviously, they kind of experiment with that in practice, but in practice versus an actual game setting, that's totally, totally different. So I expect him to have different lineups, different rotations that you kind of see. There's going to be bigger lineups. There's going to be smaller lineups. And there's probably going to be a good mix of all of it. So another thing that I'm looking at is Trent Sicily. He is a freshman coming in, but he's not your typical freshman in a lot of the sense. He looks like he's coming in ready to play, and he's ready to go. So I'm curious to see what type of role he has with this. I don't expect the other two. I know Alexa is there, but I don't know if he's going to play. And then Andre is not going to be there as well. So, yeah, I'm just curious to see what kind of lineups are happening, how he kind of subs in and subs out, and just kind of seeing what his style is with that.
Yeah, I second what Kyler said, and I kind of touched on it with the Enright, Conway, ball handling kind of stuff. Does Dere DeVries go with many lineups without both of them on the floor? Kind of what does that look like? Is Lamar Wilkerson going to play more kind of that wing spot, that 3 guard, or is he going to be also thrown into some ball handling, bringing the ball to the floor type of duties? Tucker DeVries, he's kind of a point forward. Does he get some primary ball handling duties with a bunch of longer, taller wings around him, maybe a double big? Do we see multiple bigs on the floor at one time? If we do, is Reed Bailey probably going to have to be out there as one of those double bigs to try and space the floor a little bit because Harris and Alexis aren't necessarily three-point shooters? I think that'll all be interesting to see kind of where each guy fits into, because you look at up and down the roster, guys, and it's this guy can play 1 through 4. This guy can play 1 through 3. He can play 2 through 5. It's going to be interesting to see exactly where they get pigeonholed into as far as spots and rotations and kind of lineup combinations. You know, can you play Trent Sicily and Josiah Miles together? They're kind of similar body types. Sicily obviously a little bit bigger. They offer similar-ish skill sets, but do they play together much? Is Sicily used as more of a 4-man, a small ball 4, or does he even get time as a small ball 5 when they go super small? It'll be all interesting to see those types of things to me.
Yeah, I think, the comments, like especially with Tatum Conway, the way he talked about Trent Sicily last week, really eye-opening for me at least. I think if you asked me, a month or 2 months ago, how big of a role Sicily would play as a freshman, I didn't think it would be much. I thought he, maybe end of the bench. But the way they're talking about him, his rim running ability, it seems like he's going to be a factor this season. But my biggest question is, how does the front court rotation look? I mean, you have Sam Alexis, Reed Bailey, Josh Harris, Trent Sicily, Andre Dakmovich, who I don't think we'll see too much of this year. I think he's going to be more of a, developmental piece for the future. But how does Indiana want to do it? Because when you're undersized, these bigs are going to be asked a lot. They're going to be, they're going to have to play hard. And is it going to be one of those things where we see quick rotations where they're playing in spurts and they're going to go, like we mentioned with Conor Enright, 110% for 4 or 5 minutes and then quick subs? Or is it going to be a couple guys like Reed Bailey and, Sam Alexis, or who is, I guess, Dere DeVries going to trust down the stretch from those big spots? Because it's going to be how the bigs play is really going to determine the ceiling of this team.
Yeah, and I think that's the one area. Obviously, there's multiple areas, on the basketball floor, but I do think that's the one area that I think most fans, media alike, pretty much anybody that watches Indiana basketball are kind of curious about is that front court. A lot of worrisome, when it comes to, there's not a true rim protector on this team. They're smaller bigs. They're more versatile bigs versus that ones that just kind of stand in the paint. That these guys can actually stretch the floor out. They can do a whole lot of things. They can run up and down the floor. I think that's the one area that you're going to watch, and the rotations play a big factor of that. I expect, easily Reed Bailey's obviously going to play. Sam Alexis is going to play. I think Josh Harris is going to play. Especially its earlier part in the season. When we get to that part, I totally expect him to be a factor because he is a lot of potential in him as well. So I expect Trent Sicily to play more of a 4 this year. I don't know if he's necessarily ready to make that jump to full-time on the 3, but I totally expect him to play in the 4. And then you also got to think of Tucker DeVries as a guy that can play the 4. He's one of those 1 through 4 type of guys that Zach just mentioned. You can put him basically anywhere on the floor, and he's going to be a factor. So I think the front court is kind of what you're watching. Will they show promise? Will they be a factor? Will they be okay? Because I know a lot of Indiana fans are a little worried about them right now. But me personally, you got a lot of guys that can make plays. They're really, really tough guys. Rebounding, defending, maybe a little bit of an issue with these guys. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to play really, really hard on the floor. But it's just going to be curious to see, from a skill level and on the floor, what exactly they can bring.
And I think even going further into that, how kind of Indiana varies up how they play and some of their kind of philosophical kind of ideals. depending on what lineups are on the floor. If you have just Reed Bailey out there, are you going to kind of let him play on an island one-on-one down low, as opposed to if you have maybe a couple of other guys on the floor, then you kind of just switch everything and you pretty much double the ball anytime it gets to the post. Maybe if Reed Bailey and Sam Alexis are out there, you just let the three guards kind of hang around the perimeter. You let Bailey and Alexis kind of tag team that kind of post player. It'll be interesting to see then rebounding wise, is Indiana going to send a lot to the defensive glass? If there's just one big, maybe get out and try and run a little bit more. If there's two bigs, to have them kind of anchor the defensive rebounding. I think that stuff will all be interesting as well. Does Indiana switch 1 through 5 with Reed Bailey on the floor, but maybe Sam Alexis isn't as comfortable switching out onto the guard. So maybe when Alexis is on the floor, he'll just hard hedge up top and you'll switch everything else. Kind of those are the types of intricacies I'm kind of looking at. Maybe we won't see much this week and from Puerto Rico. Maybe we won't be able to really determine that because, it will be a Puerto Rican All-Star team and a team from Serbia. So I'm not quite sure. And there'll be a lot of experimenting done, but I'm interested to see kind of those deeper kind of higher level type of things to see how DeVries handles that and what he wants to do with this team.
Yeah. And you guys both touch on this point. Oh,
sorry, Drew. Real quick point. I think you're going to see a lot this season when it comes to the front court. It's going to be game by game dependent because once you get into Big Ten play, you've got some big front courts. You've got some really big front courts. You're going to have to play Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State. Those guys are going to have big front courts. So I think a lot of times in those types of games, defensively, you could see a lot of Reed Bailey and Sam Alexis on the floor together, Josh Harris and Reed Bailey on the floor together. But I think at the same time, there's going to be a lot of times where, hey, DeVries wants these guys to play with them, right? He wants to match up with them, and he wants to be the mismatch and wants to be versatile, quick, and have guys that can stretch the floor out versus these other Big Ten teams as well. So I think game by game dependent is what you're going to see with this front court. I kind of agree with you, Zach. I don't know how much you're going to see it with this Puerto Rico trip. Honestly, we have no idea what these teams look like. So they could be really big. They could be the Big Ten bigs that we expect, but you just don't know. But I think with the front court this year, it's just going to be very game by game dependent.
And I think it'll be interesting just to add one more thought. Does Indiana kind of do the whole match up to their team or kind of just stay and play their own game? It's kind of a philosophy, are you going to try and match up with the size of the team you're playing? Are you going to match down to the size of your team that you're playing? Or are you pretty much just going to throw out there what you have and hope that it sticks and see what you can kind of do with that?
Yeah, and you guys both made a point earlier I want to kind of go back to. The importance of the guards and wings, especially with this team being undersized. Tate and Conor Enright especially, point of attack defense, stopping straight line drives. Because Indiana is going to, Indiana's probably not going to be the best rim protecting team. Let's call it how it is. But if you can prevent guys from getting into the paint, make those post entry passes tougher, because we know Purdue is going to have a lot of post ups like they always do. You are able to, maybe take teams out of their flow and keep them on the perimeter. And the point of attack defense can also, slow the team down. Maybe they don't get into their offense until 10 seconds have gone off on the shot clock and it speeds them up a little bit. Those little things that the guards and wings are doing are going to go a long way in helping the bigs battle. Is Indiana is going to be undersized. So especially on the glass too, you have a lot of good rebounders across the board. Tate and Conaway, Josiah Miles, Nick Dorn, like a lot of guys who, aren't traditional bigs, but good rebounders for their position. Indiana's going to have to attack the glass, all five. And you look at the past years, that's kind of been a little weird like the opposite, where Indiana's had some good bigs who could rebound the basketball and kind of you saw their guards and wings leak out. Indiana can't do that this year. If their guards and wings start leaking out on the defensive glass, they're going to get killed in that area, and it will be a huge issue. We'll be right back, but first, we have to talk to you guys about Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback. Best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Indiana Hoosiers, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code IND20 on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers throughout the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code IND20. Now back to the rest of this episode of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. Guys, 3-point shooting. It's the story of this team. I think, the last 4 years, it's defined the Mike Woodson era. And the biggest thing people were so excited about for Dere DeVries is there's going to be shooters. You look at Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, Jason Drake. Already, you can see the vision of shooters. But Kyler, I guess, what are you kind of looking for from the 3-point shooting in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing, right? That's the one thing that Indiana fans, people that cover Indiana, that's the one thing that they want to see out of this team. On paper, you look at all the guys, the positional versatility, what the front court guys can do, what the wings can do. There's a lot of shooting on here, or at least on paper. It seems that way. Now, there are some consistency issues. You throw in guys like Talkin Conway, Conor Enright, those types of guys. There are consistency issues, but you got one of the best, if not the best, 3-point shooter in the transfer portal in Lamar Wilkerson, right? Tucker DeVries is a bucket from 3 as well. Then you got other guys that come off the bench like Josiah Miles, Nick Dorn. Those guys can really shoot the ball as well. So that's the main thing that people are going to be watching. When it comes to the live stats, when it comes to the final box score, people are going to circle in on what they went from behind the arc. How many times did they shoot the ball? They're going to shoot it a lot more than what you ever saw in a Mike Woodson team. They're going to shoot it a lot more. And with that, if you shoot a lot more, there's a likely chance that your percentage is going to be a little bit better than what it should be. So I totally expect that to be the stat that people care about the most with this team. It's going to be a quick pace. It's going to be a fast pace, and they're going to get a lot of shots up. But it's definitely going to be something that you definitely want to see. Who's the guy that's taking the most threes? Who's the guys that are hitting the most at a consistent rate? Those are the things that you're going to have to see out of this team. So I think that's maybe the biggest storyline other than the starting 5 when it comes to looking at the Puerto Rico trip.
And I'm going to think kind of circle 2 things here with volume and with the quality of look. I think those 2 things will be really important to watch when Indiana's down in Puerto Rico. First off, on the volume side, who's taking the shots, who's kind of not taking the shots. If you look at Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, those guys probably going to lead you in 3-point attempts. Then you look at a guy like Conor Enright, Talkin Conway. Can you maybe get those percentages up by lowering the volume a little bit? Josiah Miles, Nick Dorn, those 2 guys shot decently well on a high volume at their previous stops. If you lower that volume a little bit, can that percentage go up? Reed Bailey's kind of the opposite. He shot a good percentage on a low volume. Is he going to kind of stick around that 1 3-point attempt per game mark, or are we going to see a couple of 3-point attempts per game from a guy like Reed Bailey? Do any of the other big shoot threes? What does Sicily's kind of volume look like? What does Alexis, Harris, what does their volume from 3-point range look like? And then the quality of looks, if Lamar Wilkerson has the ball, it's a 3-on-2 situation. You want to get the shot up in 12 seconds or less. Is he shooting a pull-up 3-pointer from the left side wing if he grabs a long defensive rebound? Is Tucker DeVries getting a 1-pass 3? Is it going to be more swing the ball around the perimeter, look for that kind of best shot available? How quickly are some of these threes going to be taken? How deep are some of the threes? Is it off the dribble, off the catch, off the drive and kick? I think those types of things will be interesting to see from the 3-point perspective as well.
Yeah, I fully expect volume to go up for a lot of these guys. I mean, you look at West Virginia last year under DeVries, 46.1% of their attempts were threes. That was 44th in the country compared to Indiana was, I think, 32.1%, which was like 320th in the country. So Indiana's going to shoot a lot more threes this year. I don't think that's like a surprise to anyone. But again, the quality of looks is going to be a big thing, like you said, Zach. I think you look at Josiah Miles and Nick Dorn, their 3-point percentages may not be the best on paper, but then you watch them play and you watch the looks they're getting. A lot of them were tough looks. They're tough looks off the dribble, deep threes, some grenades at the end of the shot clock. With the more spacing and more talent around those guys, you expect the quality of looks to get better, and their percentages, in theory, should go up. But then you go to the guys like Talkin Conway, who, again, the quality of looks for him similar, wasn't as great as others. And with, more talent around him, does he become a better 3-point shooter? Does that part of his game improve? Because if that improves, you already have the toughness, the playmaking, the defensive, Guru from Conway, he could become, one of the best point guards in the nation if he's able to hit threes like at a at a decent clip next season, and teams are forced to guard him out there. So those are kind of the questions I'm kind of following in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and let's be honest with you right now. There's a lot of excitement from Indiana fans when it looks at, on paper, the 3-point shooting. It all looks like it's going to be good. If they have a poor outing in those 3 games overall when it comes to 3-point shooting, it's going to be a long 3 months.
Twitter's going to be fun.
All foreign boards aren't going to like it. There's going to be a lot of worrisome with them. With that, I think Indiana fans, they're just so sick and tired of having poor 3-point shooting teams for Indiana. They have not had a good 3-point shooting team since the Tom Crean eras, where you just expected them. Maybe the defensive, end of the floor was not the greatest, but like you expected them to shoot the lights out of the ball. I do think that there is a lot of pressure, maybe not a lot of pressure, but there is some pressure for these guys to go to Puerto Rico, shoot the 3 ball really well, give this Indiana fan base a lot of confidence and a lot of, being comfortable and thinking, the fact is, we do have a good 3-point shooting team. I think they have to go in there and they have to shoot the lights out of the ball. If not, it's going to be a little worrisome, from an Indiana fan base point of view.
I'll pose a question to each of you two. Is it more important that Indiana makes a lot of threes or takes a lot of threes with the percentage maybe not? So if Indiana takes a lot of threes and the percentage isn't high, is that more important than if Indiana makes a lot of threes but the volume is relatively lower?
For me, I think it's takes. I want to see the three, them take a decent amount of threes, especially more than years past. But also, I want to see the quality of looks. I think that's going to matter to me more than anything. If they're getting good looks and they're not falling, it is what it is. It's a preseason game. But if, they're not getting good looks or forcing threes or end of shot clock, grenades, then I'm going to be a little concerned about what the Indiana offense is going to look like next year.
See, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm glad you answered first, Drew. The makes are the most important thing. I do expect Indiana, regardless, are going to shoot 25 plus threes. I think that's the bare minimum number that they're going to shoot. Makes translate into points. You can take as many as you want, but if you're not hitting them, those are no points. Those are just turnovers, in my opinion, to a certain extent. That's what you kind of saw from, the past Indiana teams. They weren't shooting at a high volume, but when they were shooting, it was kind of a turnover because you just didn't have that, strong feeling that they were going to hit it. I think the make percentage is the most important thing. I think Indiana fans want to see a really high percentage, a really good 3-point field goal percentage coming out of this Puerto Rico trip, but at the same time having a very respectable, attempt number as well. So there's different ways you can look at it. Drew and I obviously think a little bit different here and everything, but I think regardless, Indiana's just had to have a really good showing when it comes to shooting the 3 ball during this trip.
Yeah, I mean, I'll clarify, if it's astoundingly bad, like Indiana shooting in the teens from 3, then I'm definitely going to be concerned. But again, it's a preseason tournament. And, yeah, it's a preseason. That definitely was a stat line last year, but preseason, it's August. Indiana fans, I don't know how many will remember this, but Indiana beat Tennessee in a scrimmage right before the season last year. Tennessee was an Elite 8 team. Indiana didn't make the tournament. So it's preseason. There's going to be things to take away rotation-wise, lineup-wise, the quality of looks and what the offense, looks like. But again, if, shots aren't falling, it's not time to, sound the alarm and end of the world. But it is definitely something to monitor.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Just remember that it's preseason at the end of the day. It's preseason. We mentioned it last year when we previewed that Tennessee game. Don't take it with a grain of salt, but I think Indiana fans, saw them go on the road and beat a really, really good Tennessee team, and they were just, we're going to be pretty good. Then you get down to the Bahamas, and then it's just back to square one. So take it with a grain of salt, but at the same time, you do want to see some promise with this team.
Yeah, Kyler, let's call it how it is. You and I both were victims of that last year. We got a little too fired up after that Tennessee game and expectations. We got really excited after that game. And, we all know what happened last season. But I guess the last thing I want to talk about with the Puerto Rico trip is, will there be an alpha established? And if so, who could be a surprise on the roster? Zach, who are you kind of expecting to step up as maybe the alpha role on this trip?
It's interesting because this was brought up, the word alpha specifically was brought up after practice, after that open practice. And Lamar Wilkerson said, we're all alphas. We're all alphas. I mean, this is a group of guys that pretty much was the leading scorer at wherever their previous stop was, and now they're all coming to be in one team, and they obviously all can't be the leading scorer here at IU. But my answer is kind of odd. I think that Lamar Wilkerson will probably be the alpha. I think if you are in a last second, last possession type of situation, he's the alpha. He's the guy that I want with the ball in his hands. I want him taking that last shot. But just because he's the alpha doesn't necessarily mean he's the most important or most impactful player, because I think Lamar Wilkerson will probably lead this team in scoring, but I think Tucker DeVries will probably be the team's most impactful player, just what he can do, playmaking, shooting from all three levels, defense, rebounding, kind of being a leader and kind of being an on-court coach because his dad is the head coach. So I think Lamar Wilkerson is the alpha, but I think there's some other mini alphas too. I think that Tatum Conaway and Conor Enright might be some mini alphas defensively, and Tucker DeVries is kind of that 1B option to Lamar Wilkerson as far as an alpha is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any really different thoughts than what Zach gave. I think with Tucker DeVries, I would probably consider him the alpha of the team just for what he can do, what he brings to the floor, and what, he just makes players better around him. His versatility is elite. I mean, I think people kind of forget he's arguably a top 20, one of the best college basketball players in the country. And I think people have kind of forgotten about that because it was, he wasn't a highly sought after transfer portal guy or anything like that. He was just kind of forgotten about because he was really the first guy that was on this Indiana team. So I think it could change game by game basis. I think there's going to be times where you see Reed Bailey, pop off as well. Tate Conaway is going to pop off. Maybe you see a guy like Josiah Miles coming off the bench, Jason Drake, those types of guys come off the bench and really show things. But Lamar Wilkerson will obviously, on paper, you look at him, he's the best three-point shooter on this team, probably going to be the leading scorer in a lot of ways. Zach makes a good point. They were all alphas coming off, from their teams and stuff, but they can't all be the alphas. They got to learn how to play as a complete team, and some guys are going to have to learn to take a step back in a way, just to be unselfish a little bit. So I think when you do look at it, Tucker DeVries, Lamar Wilkerson, those are probably your two guys that you expect to be the quote-unquote alphas of this team.
Yeah, I think if I'm predicting, leading score at this point in the season, I think Tucker DeVries and Lamar Wilkerson will probably be the two guys you're looking at. I think Lamar Wilkerson, and I think they'll be your two leading scorers next season. But another guy, I mean, you mentioned him briefly, Tatum Conaway is like an alpha, is just a tone setter on the defensive end, plus just his ability to play make. They called him one of the most creative guys, and I think Darren DeVries said it was like you just have to let him go sometimes, because he's going to do a lot of good things on the court for you. And I think he could be someone that steps into that alpha role. You look at last season with Troy, he was Sun Belt Player of the Year, led them to the NCAA tournament. One of the only guys on the roster with NCAA tournament experience last year. Tucker DeVries obviously missed the year, and West Virginia kind of kind of got screwed, but whole nother thing. But you look at Tatum Conaway, he knew how to win. And he led that, Troy team, and he won't lead the team in scoring. I'd be very surprised if he does. But he is someone that's going to play a huge role next season and could step into that alpha role with kind of his confidence and his mentality.
And again, it goes back. It depends on how many alphas we're limiting ourselves to. Like, can we have multiple alphas? Because I could see a situation where, as I mentioned, I think Lamar Wilkerson probably the leading scorer. From a scoring perspective, he's the alpha. But then just from an everyday, day-to-day perspective, it's probably Tucker DeVries. His dad's the coach. He knows the system the best, and he's probably kind of the best player as a whole on the team. But then you talk about Tatum Conaway. Defensively, he's my defensive alpha. And then there's a situation down the stretch, you're on the ropes at home against a team that you maybe should be beating. If there's a guy that is in that huddle, a player that needs to rile up the group and kind of light into the guys, I think Tatum Conaway is probably your guy in that situation. Sam Alexis, he's got championship experience. He's got a championship just last year. So I think he's got some alpha in him as far as the locker room and kind of the energy and kind of the making sure every practice is 100% to tip-top shape. So I think there can be a couple of different alphas. I think that if we try and limit ourselves to one or two alphas, then that just doesn't work. There's too many alphas on this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the transfer portal. You see all these guys, everyone was or not everyone, but a lot of these guys were alphas on their own teams, and now you're coming together, and it's kind of figuring out how you mix and match and mesh and come together, and this Puerto Rico trip's going to be huge for that. But before we wrap up, guys, I want to ask each of you, who do you think is going to be the surprise on the team on this trip? Zach, I'll start with you.
This should come as no surprise to you guys, especially if you've been around Talking About the Hoosier podcast throughout the summer. I'm going to go with Nick Dorn. I've been riding with Nick Dorn all summer long, and I'm going to continue to do that. Although if he doesn't play, I'll add a caveat if he doesn't play, which it probably won't. But Nick Dorn, just overall, not only for Puerto Rico, but for the season, I think he'll be my surprise. Just the 6'7", 200-pound frame, can shoot, can dribble, has the length and kind of athleticism to be a good defender. Nick Dorn's my guy for the season. But as far as just the Puerto Rico is concerned, I think it'll be Trent Sicily. I think that's kind of my guy on that perspective, just at Puerto Rico, just because – sure, there's some hype around him right now after what he's done throughout the offseason with practice and what he did at Indiana's open practice, and kind of the expectations might be raising a little bit for a guy like Sicily. But I just don't think Indiana's seen a guy as impactful, a guy from the state of Indiana as a freshman be as impactful as I think Sicily not only will be this year, but will be in Puerto Rico too. And I think he'll show kind of that he belongs to get minutes and he belongs in the rotation this season, this upcoming week.
Zach took mine. I was going to totally pick Trent Sicily. Everyone knows
I'm
a big
too.
Trent Sicily guy. So I will pick a different guy. I think it's going to be Sam Alexis. I think he has an actual chance to be a surprise here. He's the closest thing to having, a true big on this roster. I think he's going to come in with a more he played at Chattanooga, if I remember correctly, right? That was where he was at before Florida. When he was with them, he showed a lot of promise, a lot of upside. Obviously, you go into Florida, they have a much deeper front court rotation, but now he's got Indiana. The opportunity there is there for him to get some really quality minutes. I think he's going to surprise some people just from his motor as a big guy, his bounce off the floor, lob ability, defensively. I think he's going to be really, really sharp. So a lot of length as well with him as well, a lot of athleticism in the big position. So I'm going to go with Sam Alexis. I think that he could really have a really strong showing, whether that's if he's playing right next to Reed Bailey or by himself out there. I think he's going to show some really nice things for this Indiana front court.
Yeah, so you guys took both of mine, so I'll pivot from there. So my, I guess not even third choice, but I think he is going to surprise, even though, there is high expectations. Tucker DeVries. You mentioned it. He's a potentially top 20 player in the country, but he's not getting talked about like he's a top 20 player in college basketball. And I think Indiana fans are going to, start to realize, that Indiana has a guy on this team. He might not lead the team in scoring. We've mentioned Lamar Wilkerson he could easily be that guy. But Tucker DeVries is an everything guy. He's a wing, but he can shoot the ball. He can handle it. He can create. He can defend. And I think Indiana fans are going to see what kind of impact he's going to have. And he may not lead the team in scoring on this trip, but just he's someone who's going to make the right play consistently. And it's something Indiana is really going to rely on all season long, I think.
I think you nailed it, Drew. Indiana has a guy, and Indiana has not had a guy since Trace Jackson Davis, if we're being completely honest here. A guy that you knew was going to be the guy for this team. With Tucker DeVries, him flying under the radar just a little bit, but, he's first team all Big Ten potential, right? Yeah. Just things that he can do. That's not to throw shade at like Lamar Wilkerson as well. I think Tucker DeVries has a better chance of being first team all Big Ten, or at least, making an all Big Ten team. But Tucker DeVries, man, what he can do on the floor, his versatility on the floor, the way he can get buckets at both inside and out. He's a big body. I think he's probably not going to be drafted, but I think he's an NBA player. And I think he's a guy that's going to get on a roster somewhere. And I think he's going to have a long pro career, whether that's in the NBA or overseas as well. But he's a pro player. And this is the first time in a long time that Indiana's had a guy like that where you can just, put him on the floor and you expect big things from him. And he's always going to give you a consistent level of production.
Yeah, he may be a pro, but his game translates really well for the college game. So it's going to be really fun to see just kind of how he's able to step into that, maybe leadership role, but on the court, just what kind of role he has within this team. But we're going to have all the coverage from Puerto Rico on the Hoosier website and all things IU athletics, including football camp. Zach, you've been there with Colin, watching practices and talking to the players. So guys, if you're not already doing so, make sure you're checking out the Hoosier on 3 on X/Twitter. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to the Hoosier for premium content, including exclusive interviews, scouting reports, and access to the Hoosier Hangout message board. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube following Talking About the Hoosiers on Spotify, and make sure to hit that like button. Thank you guys for tuning in to the 50th episode of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back.